I hope you see this. This is our quilter's playground anatomy of my quilting frame and space. Okay? We're going to tackle making our quilting and space safer, more durable, and easier to work in. All right. So I want you to ask yourself some questions, okay? What does your space look like? How large is it? And that will depend on the path and the direction you go. And your space may change. So it might change to a larger space as you have kids or grandkids move out. Life gets in the way, and family is first and foremost in our minds. And so we want to be able to help our families, and we don't want to, overreach our space when we should be helping them. But I want you to think about your space and then how much do you want to spend on your, it might be a work thing, it might be a hobby, it might be, it just might be, you do your quilting a couple times a year. It doesn't matter, but how much do you want to spend on the direction or the path that you're moving? And then how much time do you want to dedicate? That also is something I want you to think about. I mean, I spend all my time dedicated, even when I'm driving, I'm just thinking quilting all the time. Now, I love my family and I do spend a lot of time thinking about them, but my mind is very creative. And I know that all of you have very creative minds. And so you're thinking about your next project or what you're going to do for that next project. So it's a lot of fun. And then what is my direction for the future? And the reason I put all these frames up here is because each of us are at different points or different stations in our life. Some of us can have the space for a big long arm and that we can dedicate. Some of us don't have quite so much space, and we need to put our quilting stuff away when people are around or when visitors. And so we might use a tabletop frame. Others are just kind of in between. They have some space, but they don't want to dedicate a lot of money. So think about the direction and what your space looks like, because there's frames and accessories that you can use. Okay, so now we're going to get in to thinking about our space now and what we need to do to create a nice space for us. All right, so when you get your frame, even if it's a tabletop frame, the height of that frame is really important. And so I want you to think about if you're sitting or standing, how tall are you and how much of a reach do you have? And then make the adjustments. And so on this page here, I've given you some ideas to think about for your ergonomic adjustments, your key requirements for comfort, a nice chair if you're sitting and cutting and quilting. The table surface and depth of it is really important because it needs to accommodate the frame if it's a tabletop frame, your clearance for your knees and legs, and also the foot pedal. So if is your foot pedal long enough for your machine to reach the floor? If it's not, then you might need an extension cable. Just little things like that that sometimes nobody thinks about, but we need to think about as quilters. And then your sewing machine position. What direction do you want it? Are you just sewing with it? Are you push quilting with it? Are you quilting on a frame? So you want it front facing forward and not on the side. So what is easier for you and how to position it? And what is the less strain and stress on your body? When you go to sew, you probably have a comfortable chair. Maybe some of you do. And then if a chair was really what's going to make that experience a better experience because you're sitting there for a long period of time, you'll probably invest that money into making it a more comfortable experience. And then the height, okay, and lighting are really important. So look at this beautiful space. I mean, man, I would die for something that looks like this. And I know some of you have beautiful sewing rooms, but think about what room you want to dedicate to a frame and a machine, if you have it, and your cutting station. All right, so your frame height. This is from Grok. Okay, I went and asked Grok, and I thought he had a really, and Grok is Elon Musk's new thingy. So I went and asked it, what is the right height for us? And it really came up with some good recommendations. And it talked about your elbows being at a 90-degree angle so that your shoulders aren't up or down, and to adjust your handles on your machine for nice comfort. But your frame setting height is crucial for whether you're standing or sitting. So you want to be able to see the needle clearly and not have it be up too high, and make sure that as you're quilting across it, we're not overreaching and tipping. And so we want to make sure that as we're moving across our frame, we stop and stabilize who we are, because the 10-foot to 12-foot frames are really long. And so as you're quilting, moving across it, you have to stop and reposition yourself in the middle or even earlier than that before you make a mistake on your design. And this is strictly for free motion quilting. If you're using the automation, it's not as important, but for free motion, making yourself stop and reposition will give you a prettier design moving across your quilt, especially if it's edge to edge. So make sure you have the height and you reposition, and your ideal range for me, because I'm 5'6", is 38 to 40 inches off the floor. Now, if you only use the automation all the time, you might want to raise it up a little higher or a little lower depending on your height. Just make sure that you're not overreaching and moving the machine as you're making those placements. Okay, so this is strictly from our instructions. I got all this information. You see your person right here. Now it's asking you to measure from the bottom of your foot to your elbow with your arm in a 90-degree angle. And then it's letting you know what position or what hole to set your legs on. And I love the evolution frame because you can do each leg independent of the other. On some of the others, you have to do both of them at the same time, and it makes it a little hard. So this is one thing I want you to measure. And when you're at your frame in your machine, I want you to notice if your elbows are up or out, or if they're not at a 90-degree angle. You can accommodate yourself by adjusting the handles on your machine. But if you're up too high and you have a hard time reaching, let's lower that frame so it's a nice height for you. It will actually make your quilting very much safer because you're not putting the stress and strain on your neck and shoulders. So think about that, do your measurements, and then let's make our adjustments so it's a much better experience for us to quilt. Okay, so this next part is we're talking about, we decided that the height is really important to our quilting experience, but also if following the instructions and using them as you're quilting to align your tracks to your carriage. All the frames that we have right now come with a set of tracks, one in the front, one in the back, and a carriage that moves side to side. That's the bottom carriage. When you're setting it up, aligning the bottom wheels of your carriage to your tracks that go side to side is extremely important for your quilting experience. And so when you open up your instructions, I was hoping that I could encourage you to look at the names of all the different parts and components, get yourself familiar with them, so that if you have a problem, like we had with the encoders earlier, that you can go back and identify those problems, and it'll just make your life that much easier rather than having to wait and figure it out with the text. So align these tracks here. These are your long tracks, even though they're short for the cutie breeze. And this is your bottom carriage wheels. These need to be aligned so that the wheels settle and ride on the tracks. The next page is, this is our Q-zone hoop frame. Same rule applies. And so you're going to align the bottom carriage here with your tracks that go side to side. And by doing this, you'll have a more even and smoother experience with your carriage moving across your quilting frame. So on the Q-zone hoop frame, there are screws on the top that you just need to loosen on one side, either the front or the back, and then move your carriage across it and then tighten up those screws. And as you do that, it'll line up with the wheels on your bottom carriage. Another place to look to do your adjustments is your leveling feet. Some of you might have casters, but level your frame. And if you put your carriage in the middle of the frame and it's moving side to side, front to back, it needs to be leveled. Our houses over time will settle, and these are little adjustments, just like aligning your tires to your car, balancing them. That's what you're doing to your frame. And then make sure you're loading your fabric on correctly to give you a nice, smooth experience. All right. So on this one, this is showing you how to align it and how to adjust it for the Q-zone hoop frame. And then Aubrey has this nice little video that she's done. So I'm going to turn it on.
Now that both my rail is marked and my Velcro is also marked, I am peeling off the paper backing at the center of the Velcro. This allows me to easily line up my markings so I can work from the inside out, pulling back that backing in small measurements just so I can align things and make micro adjustments as needed. If you notice, I do have a string that is pulled taut across the rail. This helps me, especially if I am on a smooth rail, like my take-up rail or my top rail, um, to easily align it and get it straight. Right here, I am ending my Velcro just a little short, leaving the excess, and then I am working from the opposite side to finish up my Velcro alignment. Now what I'm doing here is that I'm taking my leader cloth, the one that is specified in the instructions for the rail I'm working with, which is the backing rail, and marking the center on both sides, the Velcro and the pin line. This will allow me, when I'm pinning my project, I can find where my center is to align my quilt backing to it properly. Now that my markings are correct, I am going to align my center marking on the leader cloth's Velcro and match it up. And what I will be doing is I will do the same thing I did with the Velcro. I'm going to mark where I need to trim my leader cloth on both sides. I find this will give me the best result when I need to trim them. If you are working on a longer frame, you probably won't need to do this on your leaders, but if you are working with a 7-foot frame like I am, you will have to do this step. Now I am removing the leaders, keeping that Velcro held down just so it doesn't come off. And what I will be doing is removing it from the frame so I can go ahead and cut it. Now that I've got everything lined up with my ruler, I'm going to take my comfort cutter and run it along the track so I know everything comes out perfect. All the work you have to do is done now, and you can add your leaders onto the rails. Go slowly and make sure everything's aligned properly, and then trim your excess Velcro off either side. As I'm finishing up, I do want to mention that you should keep your leader cloths rolled onto your rail when they aren't in use. This will help with keeping that adhesive cemented onto the rail, because if you are in a different climate where it gets really hot or moist, this will help. Thank you so much. Now that
All right, thanks, Aubrey. That was awesome. Okay, so this is the Q-zone queen. Same rule applies. I want you, if you have the Q's and Queen, to loosen up the screws along the track supports. That's the item that holds the tracks. Learn the names of all the parts to your frame. And then you'll loosen those screws and then just slide your carriage across and tighten the screws up. This will really help you as you're quilting, readjust and realign. Now they have a little bit different track, so make sure that you're adjusting it. Now this one right below, okay, this is key. Because we have two poles and we don't have an idler pole, as you are quilting, this take-up pole, this is the pole that goes through the arm of your machine or through the throat of your machine right down below. It starts filling up with fabric. As it starts filling up with fabric, it starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and this part will start rubbing. Okay, you need to adjust the sides, okay, and raise both sides to make it even. Now, the same rule applies that if you've had a quilt and you've finished it, if you don't lower it back down, then it's going to be up too high. You'll have too much space in between here and you'll get a lot of bounce and play on your quilt and your stitches will look horrible. So make sure that you're adjusting your take-up rail and your front rail so it's nice and flat and even all the way across. Notice right over here on the leader or on installing your fabric, how nice and even it is. So make sure that if you've raised this one up, you're also raising this one up so it's a flat surface. Okay, but don't raise it up too high because you can actually raise this one up higher or have it down lower, and this one can get a reverse plane. Just very important for us to understand how our frames and machines work on the frames. Okay, so here's the evolution frame. We have on the evolution frame, what makes it so cool is it is a sturdy frame, you guys. So if you have a lot of play in your poles right now, this frame eliminates the poles kind of giving you too much play in and out. It's just such a solid frame. And the same rule applies in aligning your tracks. So this is the hoop style. You can start out with a hoop frame if you don't have a lot of space, and you can evolve to a 12-foot frame. And that's the beauty of this. It comes with the leaders. It's our top of the line frame. Man, it's just awesome. It comes with channel locks. Most of our frames do come with channel locks, so you can lock the position of them and use them, but to install the leaders. So as you're quilting, make sure you're going back through and making those adjustments. Make it level and make sure it carriage checks. Like I said, over time. So in our classrooms, we have 8 machines set up. Well, actually 16. And we pull them in and out for events. So pulling them in and out, and over time, as you're moving back and forth, the screws start to loosen. So you need to do this maintenance twice a year and tighten up all your screws, make sure they're not coming loose, and readjust. Okay, so this is showing you how to align, and you'll see that up underneath there are these little holes that have these screws up underneath them. The continuum frames, the majestic frames, all of those frames kind of have the same method of aligning the tracks to the carriage, and they're all underneath here, and you just need to get your Allen wrench, loosen and tighten them up and readjust. Not hard to do, you guys, and it's something that you don't need somebody to do for you. This is something that you all can do. All right. Now, this rail height, I can't harp on this enough. It's so important that you start with the correct rail height and adjust if you don't have an idler rail. And this is kind of showing you how you do it on the evolution frame. But you'll notice on this quilt here, it's rubbing. And this one, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this one's actually up too high. And so they were getting a lot of play in their quilting. And so a lot of bounce and a lot of uneven, ugly stitches. So if it's up too high, it's hard for the machine to grab that thread and give you a beautiful stitch. All right, this is talking about the pros and cons of an idler rail. An idler rail is awesome, you guys. Then you don't have to raise and lower your sides. You just like the hoop frames, you set it once and you don't have to worry about doing adjusting it as you're quilting because the fabric rolls up onto this take-up pole. Right here is the take-up pole. It's positioned up higher in the throat of your frame of your machine, and the idler rail just sits down here. The con of the idler rail is that you do lose quilting area. So if you have a 15-inch machine or 16, it's probably not ideal for you to have an idler rail. It's convenient, but you will lose too much quilting space because it does, because of the curves right here on the machine, it does stop you from reaching all the way to the edge. All right, another con to it, okay? The pros and cons is that if you have a wider border, it's hard for you to place and quilt a wider border using the idler rail. So be very careful that you're utilizing it to its full extent and understanding what will happen if you do have those. And it does add cost to it. I don't think it adds complexity, but it does have the potential to interfere in your quilting space. All right, move on. All right, so right here is another reason why we like the evolution frame, and it's because that idler rail is also an accessory rail, so you can use it for your batting. And on this frame here, unlike any of our other frames, you could put a full roll of batting on it, and because it's so stable, you could just lift it up. So you that are quilting for others and that's your gig and you would need to get the quilt on and off by putting a full roll of batting on this, it might be time for you to think about what is my next step and considering a frame that will accommodate that bolt of batting. Okay, all right. All right, let's talk lighting. I can't tell you enough how important lighting is to your whole quilting experience. I was quilting the other day using the rulers, and my gosh, I could not see my seams because I was using the same color of thread and I was getting off. And I was like, where is my light bar? I needed my light bar. So I went and grabbed it and I pulled it from the other room. But it makes a huge difference. So if you don't have a light bar, I really want you to think about your lighting and how important it is. Also, the stress and strain. We look at our computers all day long sometimes, and our eyes just become so buggy after a while that just looking at a natural light and having it not be too hot on us and everything is really important. So find some good lighting and make sure that you're utilizing it because you'll be able to adjust your needles easier and find your quilt. Now let's talk about our machines. Okay, so if you guys I showed you where the resources were. If you don't have your instructions or you know where the buttons are on your machine, let's learn them. Let's learn to understand them and how to use them and what their functions are and what they're all about. I want you guys to explore. This is the Quilters Playground. We're trying new things. We're living on the edge and we're going to push buttons. That's what we do. We like to push buttons and see what they'll do. All right, so print off your instructions, have them right there. These are our little quick start guides that are just right there. They're great resources that now come with the machines, but they didn't currently before. And so just use them and to get to know what each of the buttons and functions do on the quilting screen and frames. So this is also the card for the 21X Elite. And I just wanted to show you, it gives you all the names of all the parts on it. And then here's the one for the buttons. It shows you the increase and decrease. This is the start and stop, and this is the needle up, needle down, or single stitch button. Get familiar with those so that you can learn how to use them and use them correctly. But right here, I wanted to talk about oiling your machine. Okay, so most of the time we tell you to do a drop of oil up here at the top of your machine. Okay, I'm going to ask you not to do that anymore. What I want you to do is to get a little brush, okay, and put some oil on it, and I want you to dab it on the needle bar right here all the way around. put it on the needle bar, and then what you're going to do is change your machine to manual mode and then let it move up, so up and down. Just turn it on, and in manual mode, it'll just stitch up and down, and then it will work the oil into the working components of the needle bar. That's the one that goes up and down. The hopping foots, you don't need to oil it at all, okay? Just the needle bar and then down here in the hook, okay? So take your bobbin case out, unthread your needle, and do a dab of oil here and in your hook and let it run on manual for about 2-3 minutes and then stop it and then change it to your regulated precise. Wipe off any excess oil and you're good to go, okay? And make sure you're setting your hopping foot height correctly as well. So if you have any problems with this one here, I wanted to talk about the encoders and the position of the encoders. So some of us may be using our Sure Stitch Elite or our Stitch Regulator, and it's awesome. So get to know the cords and the pedals and where you plug them in. Get to recognize and learn all those different ports because it'll make your quilting experience that much better. Marie and I get to use the machines and the frames all the time. So we kind of learn the ins and outs and understand them. And so when you call up, sometimes we're quick to the draw. Other times we have to take a step back and think about what it is that you need to fix. But this encoder wheel is crucial. So you'll make sure it's positioned correctly and you have it plugged into the correct ports for the encoders and that it's locked. So this little collar right here should be at the 12 o'clock position. And that's what will hold it in place and let it spring in position. If you flick up on your encoder or hold it up and it doesn't spring back down, then you've got a little problem with it and we need to get those tightened up or fixed. Okay, we're almost getting to the end here. Here's my glossary. Please learn the glossary. Learn what your frame and machine, the names of them. It will make such a better experience for you. And then we can just talk. And then you can get online and say, Karla, I'm having a problem with my take-up rail. Something's going on. Or Karla, when I used my needle up, needle down, it didn't grab the bobbin thread. And then I know what to look for and what to expect. And it's just the same thing for the text. This will really help you when you have to call in if you know the parts and the components of your framing machine. All right, so I've given you a big long list. So gone. Now we get to the fun part. Now I get to talk to you about homework, okay? I know, I don't like homework either, but this will be fun, okay? So I've given you this little grid here. What I want you to do is print off several pieces of paper and then just practice working from the inside out using your grid. And then I would like for you to, I'm not going to say it's mandatory or anything like that because it's all subjective to you. Cut out 4 pieces of fabric. And you can do them whatever size you want, 10 by 10, 12 by 12, whatever your square ruler allows you to do. All right. And then I want you to put those designs on there, but I want you to use all the different modes, okay? Because I want you to learn how to gauge your pace as you're moving across your quilt or in a space. So as you're stitching, when you turn it on, you start stitching. I want you to try changing your stitches per inch while you're moving. I want you to raise it and lower it and then change how fast you're moving the machine so that you learn to understand where your sweet spot is and how fast you can move the machine. Then I want you to try it in cruise and manual mode. So it's in manual mode that I'd like for you to turn your overspeed on because this overspeed is going to tell you that you're moving the machine faster than it can actually sew, and then it's going to help you pace your movements. So in manual mode, it's not stitch regulated. So you can really learn a lot about how fast you're moving it, if you're overdoing it or underdoing it. So here's your assignment to take these grids, move them off, and I want you to start from the center out, draw your design, and then use it as your inspiration. And then when you're in manual mode, especially, move it, start out at a really slow speed, but move it slowly. And then I want you to keep it at the slow speed and then start moving it faster and see what happens to the stitches. Then while you're doing that, I want you to click on your handle and raise your SPI. We're multitasking here, you guys. You're going to raise your SPI up, or not your SPI, your speed up on your manual mode. You raise it up and make it so faster, and then you're going to have to adjust your movements. And this is going to help you recognize. And I just hope you guys can learn a lot from just this little homework assignment and understand how your movements equate to better stitching. Even in regulated modes, you can outrun your machine. And so by understanding how fast it can sew, how fast your movements are, and listening and watching and hearing and adjusting your movements to accommodate how fast the machine is stitching, that you'll be a much better quilter. And that's what we're here to learn, is to become better quilters. And I'm going to do it too. And I hope you have a lot of fun. Okay. So here's my shout out. Let's get everybody we can to become and be a part of this great, wonderful community. And it's because of you that it's so great and wonderful. Thanks for joining me today. And let's just make it grow and grow. So tell all your friends. Tell all your friends that don't even have our products. We just want this to grow and be the best event possible for you. And thank you, you guys. It's because of you that Grace Company is such a wonderful place to work. And it wouldn't be that great without you.
So let's talk about the Quilters Playground. This thing has grown so much, even in the few months that we've been working on it, and it has been largely due to your support. So thank you for showing up and making it possible for us to offer this. So what you see here is we've got our free Zoom classes. That's what we're on here today, is this free Zoom class. So please share it with all your friends, your other quilters. Would love to see more faces here as well. Tuesdays, there are focus groups, again, just on Zoom. We get in and we chat and we ask questions and we talk about products and quilting and just being human beings in general. Karla has mentioned tonight, she does her on-site classes. And so those are always a huge benefit if you're able to make the travel happen. I know that can be hard sometimes, but as a member of the Quilters Playground community, you do get your first class for free. So you're welcome to cash in on that. We'd love to see you and hang out with you in person. And then we are just starting this month a new group. This is our Quilting Professional Support Group. This came as a spinoff from one of our focus groups. And so the third Tuesday of every month, so next week, we're going to do our initial kickoff. Anybody who is quilting for others or thinks they might be quilting for others, or trying to make money in this world, come hang out and let's learn from each other. Karla, here's her email. We've talked about this a lot. Karla@graceframe.com. You're welcome to email her with questions. And I know Karla mentioned it. I'm going to reinforce it. Please like us, share us, comment on YouTube, help us grow the Quilters Playground there as well, and spread the word about what's happening here at Grace Company.